Thomas had spent 34 years fixing things. Bridges, systems, machines that no one else could understand. He had a method. Identify the problem. Analyze the variables. Implement the solution. It worked every time. Except once. His son, Ethan, had stopped calling 2 years ago. No fight. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. One day the phone rang every Sunday. Then it didn't. Thomas told himself it was a phase. Young people get busy. They forget. They'll come back when they need something. But Ethan never needed anything. At least, nothing Thomas knew how to give. Margaret, his wife of 31 years, had stopped mentioning it. She used to leave hints. She would say Ethan's name and watch Thomas's face. She would suggest he try calling at a different time. She would leave her phone open to photos of their son. Now, she just looked tired. One evening, Thomas found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Her coffee had gone cold. He asked if she was all right. She didn't look up. She said she was fine. The way she said it made clear she wasn't. Thomas sat across from her. The kitchen had become a strange place. Too quiet. Too clean. Like a room waiting for people who no longer came. He asked what was wrong. Margaret finally looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. She told him their son was getting married. In 3 months. And they hadn't been invited. Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. He asked how she knew. She said Ethan's cousin had posted it online. That was how they found out. He didn't understand. He asked what he had done. Margaret's hands tightened around her mug. She said that was the problem. He never understood, and she was too tired to keep explaining. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, running through memories like diagnostic reports, looking for the error. He remembered Ethan at 16, coming home with a plan to start a band. Thomas had listened for 2 minutes, then explained why it wasn't practical. He gave 5 reasons. All logical, all correct. Ethan had nodded and never mentioned it again. He remembered Ethan at 22, graduating with a degree in music. Thomas had attended. He had clapped. Afterward, he had asked what the backup plan was. Ethan's smile had disappeared. He remembered Ethan at 25, calling to say he'd met someone. Thomas had asked about her job, her family, her background. Ethan went quiet, then said he had to go. Every memory followed the same pattern. Ethan would share something. Thomas would respond with logic, and something small would die between them. But Thomas had never seen it that way. He thought he was helping. He thought he was being a good father, preparing his son for the real world. Now he wondered if the real world was just a place where his son didn't want him. 3 days passed. Thomas didn't eat well. Didn't sleep well. Margaret watched him but said nothing. She had stopped trying years ago. One morning, Thomas stood in the kitchen and told her he was going to see Ethan. Margaret looked up. Her eyes searched his face. She asked if he knew what he was going to say. Thomas admitted he didn't. She nodded slowly. That was the first honest thing he had said in years. The drive took 4 hours. He parked across the street and sat there for 20 minutes. His hands gripped the steering wheel. He had solved problems his whole life. But he didn't know how to start this conversation. Ethan opened the door. He looked older, tired. There was a moment of nothing. Just 2 men staring at each other. Then Ethan's jaw tightened. He asked what Thomas was doing there. His voice was flat. Not angry. Worse. Indifferent. Thomas said he wanted to talk. Ethan leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. He said there was nothing to talk about. Thomas felt the old instinct rise. The need to explain. To defend. He started saying that he had always tried to help, that everything he did was for Ethan's own good, that he never meant to push him away. Ethan listened. His face didn't change. When Thomas finished, Ethan just nodded. He said he had heard this before. Then he stepped back and started to close the door. Something broke inside Thomas. Not anger. Something deeper. He put his hand on the door, not to force it open. Just to pause. He remembered something Margaret had said years ago, after another fight with Ethan. She had told him that sometimes people don't need solutions. They just need someone to hear them. He had ignored it then, called it emotional nonsense. But now, standing at his son's door, those words returned. Thomas took a breath. Then he did something he had never done before. He asked Ethan what he had done wrong. Not to defend himself, not to argue, just to understand. Ethan stopped, his hand still on the door. He looked at his father, like he was seeing a stranger. The silence stretched. Then Ethan asked if he really wanted to know. Thomas nodded and waited. Ethan spoke in a quiet voice. He talked about the band he wanted to start at 16, and how Thomas had killed it in 2 minutes with 5 logical reasons. He talked about graduation day, and how Thomas had asked about backup plans while Ethan was still holding his diploma. He talked about the phone call when he met the woman he loved, and how Thomas had interrogated him like a job interview. Every word landed like a wound Thomas had never seen. Thomas wanted to interrupt, to explain, to say he didn't mean it that way. The words gathered in his throat, but he swallowed them. He just listened. Ethan kept going. He said Thomas had never once asked how he felt. Never once said he was proud. Every conversation was a problem to be solved. And Ethan had stopped calling because he was tired of being a problem. When Ethan finished, the silence felt different. Not angry. Not cold. Just empty. Thomas felt his eyes burn. He didn't wipe them. He told Ethan he was right. About everything. He said he had spent 30 years solving problems and never realized his son didn't need solutions. He needed a father who listened. Thomas admitted he didn't know how to fix this. But he wanted to learn, if Ethan would let him. Ethan didn't respond right away. He looked at his father for a long time. Then, he stepped aside. Not a hug. Not forgiveness. Just an open door. Thomas walked in. For the first time in 2 years, they were in the same room. Not as an engineer and a problem, just as a father and a son. They talked for 3 hours. Thomas asked questions he had never asked. About Ethan's music, his work, his life. He didn't give advice, didn't offer solutions, just listened. When he left, Ethan walked him to the car. They stood there awkwardly. Then Ethan said something Thomas would remember forever. He said it was the first real conversation they had ever had. Thomas nodded. His throat was too tight to speak. On the drive home, Thomas realized something. He had spent his whole life believing communication meant having the right answer, solving the problem faster than anyone else. But some conversations don't need to be won. They need to be heard. Ethan hadn't needed an engineer. He had needed someone to sit with him in the mess, without fixing, without judging, just present. The wedding invitation arrived 3 weeks later. She didn't say anything. She just handed it to Thomas, with tears in her eyes. He looked at it for a long time. His name was written in Ethan's handwriting. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever received, not because he was invited, but because he had finally learned what it meant to listen.